Attention. Have you ever underestimated someone so profoundly that your entire world came crashing down? Prepare yourself for the story of Garrett Vance, a man who believed he had it all: power, wealth, and a decorative wife. What he didn't know was that the woman sitting across from him every morning, the one he so casually dismissed, was about to unleash a storm that would sweep away his life. This isn't just a tale of revenge. It's a symphony of poetic justice that will leave you breathless. Garrett Thorne adjusted his $1,000 tie, a predator assessing his domain. The polished mahogany of the boardroom table reflected his confident smirk. Beside him, his beautiful, ambitious protégé, Sienna Cross, gave his hand a subtle squeeze beneath the table. This meeting was his launch pad. He was about to present his 5-year growth strategy to the mysterious new CEO of their parent company, Apex Strategies. A promotion to senior vice president was practically in his pocket. He just had to impress a corporate titan he'd never met. He leaned toward his rival, Rami Saeed, whispering with a smug chuckle, "I wish my wife could see this. She thinks my biggest decision of the day is what to cater for a luncheon." Little did he know, the most important decision of his day had already been made by the very woman he so casually scorned. The boardroom doors were about to open, and his entire world was about to burn to the ground. The golden cage. The morning ritual. The pale, indifferent morning sun filtered through the picture windows of the Manhattan penthouse. Garrett Vance called home. It was a space designed for a magazine cover, all sharp lines, subdued colors, and cold, impersonal art. It was a testament to success, a monument to ambition, and as sterile as an operating room. Garrett stood before a full-length mirror, knotting a silk tie the color of spilled wine. Every movement was precise, practiced, a reflection of a man who believed he had total control of his universe. "Eleanor, have you seen my silver cufflinks? The ones from the Geneva trip?" he asked, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous living space. He didn't turn around. He simply watched his own reflection, admiring the cut of his Italian suit. From the kitchen, a space of gleaming stainless steel and marble that rarely saw any actual cooking, appeared Eleanor Hayes. She wore simple gray yoga pants and a worn cotton t-shirt, her dark hair pulled back into a loose ponytail, and her face devoid of makeup. To a stranger, she was the picture of a subdued, comfortable homemaker. To Garrett, she was part of the decor. He had long ago stopped noticing her. "They're in your travel kit, on the dresser, where they always are," she said, her voice even and calm. She held a mug of black coffee, steam curling around her fingers. Garrett grunted, finding them exactly where she had said. "Right. Big day today. The final presentation to the new CEO of Apex." He snapped the cufflinks on. The metallic click punctuated the silence. "This is it, Ellie. The step into the C-suite. Everything I've been working for." "I'm sure you'll be wonderful, Garrett," she replied, taking a slow sip of her coffee. There was no emotion in her voice, just a quiet, observing tone that he found perpetually irritating. It was as if she were watching a play rather than living in the same reality as he was. "You could try to sound a little more excited," he chided, finally turning to look at her. He scanned her appearance with a faint, almost imperceptible frown. "You know this apartment, your charity lunches, the life you have. It's all because of these big days." Eleanor's deep, intelligent blue eyes met his. There was a flicker of something in them, neither anger nor sadness, but something far more complex. It was a look he hadn't been able to decipher in years. "I am aware of what you provide me, Garrett. I've never forgotten." The subtext was lost on him, or perhaps he chose to ignore it. He only saw the modest woman before him, the one who had abandoned her own promising career in software engineering 15 years ago when he'd received his first big promotion. It was his narrative, the one he had polished and perfected. Over time, he had ascended, and she had acquiesced. He had graciously allowed her to retreat to a life of leisure while he battled the titans of industry. "I have to bring Sienna with me," he stated, the affirmation sounding more like a declaration than a request for opinion. She was instrumental in compiling the data for the presentation. It's good exposure for a junior analyst. Eleanor's expression didn't change. She just nodded slowly. Sienna Cross, the blonde from the marketing department, the one you mentored at the Aspen Company retreat. Garrett felt a brief, unpleasant jolt. He hadn't realized Eleanor paid such close attention. "Yes, that's the one. She's brilliant, eager to learn." He conveniently omitted that Sienna was 26, adored the ground he walked on, and had spent the previous night in a hotel room with him, celebrating his pre-victory. "Well, I hope her exposure is educational," Eleanor said, turning to place her mug in the sink. The words were simple, but they hung in the air with a strange weight. Garrett dismissed it as another one of her passive-aggressive moods. He grabbed his leather brief, the scent of expensive cologne trailing behind him. He paused at the door, looking at his wife. She stood with her back to him, gazing out the window at the sprawling New York skyline. For a fleeting moment, she looked like a stranger in his own home. "Don't wait up for me," he said. The words were a familiar refrain. "It'll be a long day of meetings, followed by a celebratory dinner." "Oh, I won't," Eleanor replied, her voice soft yet clear. "I have a very busy day planned too. You have no idea." He let out a laugh, a short, condescending sound. "Right. Shopping at Bergdorf's or planning another fundraiser. Try not to strain yourself." He said to shut the door behind him, the solid click sealing him out of her world and her within the golden cage he had so carefully built. He walked to the elevator, a triumphant smirk on his face, picturing Sienna waiting for him in the lobby, her eyes bright with admiration and something more. He felt powerful, untouchable, the king of his castle. Meanwhile, Eleanor remained at the window, watching her husband's black sedan pull away from the curb, 40 floors below. She took a deep breath, the first truly relaxed one she had taken all morning. She took the hair tie out, letting her dark hair fall to her shoulders. She walked to the sleek, minimalist coffee table and picked up a tablet. With a few taps, she pulled up a file. It was the complete acquisition portfolio for Nexus Corp, the company Garrett worked for by Apex Strategies. She scrolled until she found his name. Garrett Vance, VP of Marketing. A small, cold smile touched her lips. "Enjoy your celebration, Garrett," she whispered to the opulent, empty room. "It's the last one you'll have for a long time." She then swiped to her calendar. Her first appointment at 10 a.m. was marked in bold. Board meeting. Introduction to Nexus Corp executive staff. The ride to the fall. Sienna's revelation. The leather seats of Garrett's Mercedes were the color of rich cream, a stark contrast to the vibrant red of Sienna Cross's dress. The dress was a strategic choice, bold enough to be memorable, yet elegant enough to scream ambition rather than desperation. "Nervous?" Sienna asked, her voice a purr. She ran a perfectly manicured finger across the dashboard. Garrett laughed, a deep, confident sound that filled the car. "Nervous, Sienna? Nervousness is for the unprepared. We've run through this presentation 100 times. The numbers are solid. My strategy is revolutionary. This new CEO, whoever he is, will have no choice but to be impressed." He emphasized the he, a casual assumption based on the aggressive acquisition tactics Apex Strategies was known for. "And me?" she asked, turning in her seat to face him. "Will they be impressed with me?" "They'll see a sharp, dedicated analyst who supports her VP," he said, reaching out to put a possessive hand on her knee. "Just stick to the script. Leave the talking to me, unless directed a question. Answer concisely. Look smart. That's all you have to do. This is my show." Sienna's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. She craved the spotlight, but understood the hierarchy. For now, she was his accessory, the brilliant but subordinate mind who helped the great Garrett Vance achieve his destiny. Her moment would come. She believed his promises, that once he was promoted, he'd create a new director role just for her, and that he would finally leave his boring, passionless wife. "Catherine didn't seem to mind that you brought me," she said, testing the waters as she often did. "She never suspects," Garrett scoffed, his eyes on the traffic. "Ellie stopped paying attention a decade ago. She lives in her little world of charity galas and book clubs. I doubt she even remembers your name. To her, you're just an intern I'm magnanimously giving a career boost. It's the perfect cover." The phrase de bois mercier. The perfect cover stung Sienna more than she let on. She wasn't a cover. She was the future. She was the one who understood his ambition, who matched his drive. Catherine was a relic, a ghost of a past life he hadn't quite managed to shed. She just seemed so placid, Sienna mused. When I saw her at the company Christmas party, she barely spoke. She just stood there smiling. It was a little sad. "It's not sad. It's comfortable," Garrett corrected. "She has everything a woman could want without having to lift a finger. I gave her that. She should be grateful." He truly believed it. His guilt over the affair was a tiny, shriveled thing, easily overshadowed by his sense of magnanimity. In his mind, he was providing for 2 women. He was a modern patriarch. They soon left the congested city streets, turning onto the private access road that led to the Apex Strategies corporate tower. The building was a spear of smoked glass and obsidian steel piercing the New York sky. It was a statement of pure, blatant power, dwarfing the more modest headquarters of Nexus Corp. When Garrett pulled into the reserved underground parking spot, a valet rushed to open their doors. Sienna felt a genuine chill of awe. This was the major league. This was where fortunes were made and empires were forged. "All right," Garrett said, turning to her before they stepped out. He looked her up and down, his eyes lingering on the tightness of her dress. "You look perfect. Remember the plan. We're a team, but I'm the captain. Follow my lead, and tonight we'll be celebrating your future boss's promotion to SVP." He sealed the promise with a quick, hard kiss that tasted of coffee and ambition. Black Pawn, the grand reveal. The Nexus boardroom. They ascended in the silent, high-speed elevator to the 60th floor, the penthouse level. The doors opened, not to a reception area, but directly into a vast, minimalist atrium with a panoramic view of the city. The air was cool and smelled faintly of ozone and money. A severe-looking woman with a sharp haircut and a tablet met them. "Mr. Vance? Ms. Cross, welcome to Apex. The board is convening. Please follow me." "Hello." She led them down a hallway lined with abstract art that likely cost more than Garrett's car. Everyone they passed was impeccably dressed, moving with a silent urgency. The atmosphere was electric, a sharp contrast to the often complacent culture of Nexus Corp. Garrett felt his own confidence surge. He belonged here. This was his natural habitat. He gave Sienna a reassuring wink. He was her guide in this rarefied world, her benefactor. The assistant stopped before a pair of imposing frosted glass doors. "They're ready for you. Mr. Sterling is already inside." Richard Sterling was the outgoing CEO of Nexus Corp, a man in his 60s, happy to take his golden parachute and retire to Florida. He was a formality, a bridge between the old and the new. The real power, the person Garrett had to conquer, awaited behind those doors. Garrett smoothed his suit jacket, took a deep breath, and pushed the door open, stepping into the brightest, most intimidating boardroom he had ever seen. The Apex Strategies boardroom was less a room and more a theater for corporate warfare. One entire wall was a seamless glass panel, offering a godlike view of the city. The table was a single colossal slab of polished granite, so dark it seemed to absorb the light. Seated around it were a dozen individuals who radiated an aura of quiet, lethal competence. These were the Apex executives. At the head of the table sat Richard Sterling, looking more like a guest than a host. Garrett scanned the faces. There was the CFO, a severe-looking man in his late 50s. The head of legal, a woman with keen, intelligent eyes, Ava Thorne, and several other VPs he recognized from industry publications. They were the sharks, and he was here to prove he was one of them. "Garrett, good of you to join us," Richard Sterling said, his voice a little too loud in the silent room. "Everyone, this is Garrett Vance, our VP of Marketing at Nexus Corp, and his analyst, Sienna Cross." Cold, evaluating nods were exchanged. Garrett felt a dozen pairs of eyes assessing him, and he met them with his most charming, confident smile. He and Sienna took the two empty seats opposite the core board members. He placed his sleek laptop and leather folio on the table, his movements economical and self-assured. Rami Saeed, his internal rival and VP of Operations, sat a few chairs down. Rami gave him a tense, professional nod. Garrett saw the flicker of jealousy in Rami's eyes, and he savored it. Rami had come alone. Garrett, on the other hand, had brought his star protege, a visual testament to his leadership and eye for talent. "We are just waiting for our new CEO to join us," stated Ava Thorne, the sharp legal counsel. Her voice was crisp and brooked no argument. "She is finishing up a call with our Tokyo office. The word she registered in Garrett's mind with a flash of surprise. He had automatically assumed the new boss would be a man. A female CEO in this aggressive tech acquisition space was rare. He mentally recalibrated. This was even better. In his experience, he was excellent at charming, powerful women, at playing the role of the indispensable, brilliant male subordinate. To fill the silence, Richard Sterling began making compliments. "Garrett has been with Nexus for 12 years, a real pillar of the company. His marketing strategies were key to our growth back in the early 2010s. It was a faint compliment that referenced past glories. Garrett felt a spike of irritation. He was about to unveil the future, not revisit the past. He directed a charming smile toward Ava Thorne. "Richard is too kind. The past is prologue. I'm far more excited to discuss the next 5 years. We are poised to penetrate the South American market in a way no one has anticipated." Before anyone could respond, he leaned slightly toward Rami Saeed, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "It's another level up here, isn't it? Makes you feel sorry for those left behind. I spoke to Ellie this morning. She was agonizing over which caterer to use for a luncheon. God bless her." He shook his head with a look of affectionate exasperation. "Different worlds." Rami offered an evasive grunt, but Garrett knew the seed was planted. He was painting a picture of himself, a high-flying executive, unencumbered by domestic triviality. Being married to a simple woman who managed the home while he conquered the world was a part of his personal brand. Sienna, sitting beside him, subtly preened, feeling the implied contrast. She was part of the real world. His world. The tension in the room suddenly shifted. A palpable wave of deference and respect swept through the Apex executives as they subtly straightened in their chairs, their eyes pivoted toward the frosted glass doors. The quiet chatter ceased. "Looks like showtime," Richard Sterling murmured, with a hint of relief in his tone. Garrett felt a jolt of adrenaline. His moment had arrived. He smoothed his tie one last time, squared his shoulders, and focused on the entrance. He readied his power smile, the one that conveyed equal parts respect and ambition. This woman, whoever she was about to meet the man who would be the most valuable asset in her newly acquired company. He would make himself undeniable. The heavy glass doors slid open with a faint hydraulic hiss. A pair of expensive-looking, yet discreet black heels clicked determinedly on the marble floor. They were followed by the sharp crease of a navy pantsuit, tailored with a precision that bespoke immense wealth and a refusal to compromise. The woman who walked in was tall and moved with an unshakable poise that instantly dominated the room. Her dark hair, which Garrett had last seen in a messy ponytail, was swept back into a sleek, neat bun at the nape of her neck. Her face, bare of makeup this morning, was now skillfully and minimally enhanced to highlight her strong cheekbones and penetrating blue eyes. She was not smiling. Her expression was one of cold, distant authority. She walked toward the head of the table, her gaze sweeping over the gathered executives, acknowledging each with a slight, almost imperceptible nod. And then her eyes landed on him. For one horrifying, paralyzing second, Garrett Vance's world stopped spinning. The blood drained from his face, replaced by an icy terror that started in his gut and spread through his veins. His confident smile dissolved, his mouth falling slightly open. The room, the table, the people, everything blurred into a meaningless background. There was only her, the modest homemaker, the woman he thought was deciding on canapés, his wife. She stopped at the head of the table, placing a thin tablet in front of her. Her voice when she spoke was not the soft, familiar tone he heard over breakfast. It was a voice tuned for command, crisp, clear, and carrying an edge of steel. "Good morning, everyone. I apologize for the delay. Thank you all for being here. For those of you from Nexus Corp, whom I have not had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Eleanor Hayes. I am the founder and CEO of Apex Strategies." She paused, letting her name, her maiden name, and her title sink in. Her cold blue eyes then moved deliberately around the table, past the other executives, past Rami Saeed's stunned face, past Sienna's total confusion, and locked directly onto her husband's. A flash of something cold and sharp passed through them before she addressed him directly. Her voice cut across the stunned silence of the room. "Mr. Vance, it is a pleasure to finally meet you in a professional capacity." The words Mr. Vance hit Garrett with the force of a physical blow. It was the name of a stranger, a subordinate, a line item on a balance sheet. In that single formal address, 15 years of shared history, of intimacy and marriage, evaporated. He was no longer Marcus, her husband. He was Mr. Vance, the employee. His mind scrambled frantically, trying to assemble the collapsing puzzle pieces. Eleanor Hayes. Hayes, her maiden name. The name on her old university degrees, the ones he had packed away in a box in the attic. Artifacts of a life he thought she had left behind. Apex. Hayes. The connection was so obvious, so insultingly simple, that it had never occurred to him to make it. He stared at her. This woman in the power suit who looked like his wife, but felt like an alien queen. The quiet observer at his breakfast table was gone. In her place was a formidable executive who held his entire future in the palm of her hand. The condescending joke he'd made to Rami Saeed moments earlier replayed in his head. Every word an injury, self-inflicted. The humiliation was a physical sensation, a hot blush that crept up his neck and burned his ears. Next to him, Sienna was a statue of confusion. She looked from Eleanor to Garrett and back again, her brow furrowed. The resemblance was undeniable, but the context was impossible. She watched the blood drain from Garrett's face, the rigid terror in his posture. A sickening, mounting comprehension began to curdle in her stomach. this powerful, intimidating woman. It couldn't be. Eleanor showed no emotion. She was the very picture of corporate control. "Let us begin," she said, her gaze sweeping the room again, deliberately avoiding Garrett now. As you all know, Apex Strategies has officially completed the acquisition of Nexus Corp. For many of you at Apex, this is business as usual. For our new colleagues at Nexus, I understand it is a time of uncertainty. Let me be clear. My goal is not to dismantle what you have built, but to identify your core strengths, cut your considerable fat, and integrate your viable assets into our global strategy. The phrase "cut your considerable fat" hung in the air like a guillotine blade. All the Nexus executives shifted uncomfortably. Garrett felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. "I have spent the last 6 weeks conducting an exhaustive analysis of every department," Eleanor continued, tapping her tablet. A huge screen behind her lit up with complex charts and data streams. Finance, operations, R&D, and marketing. I've read every report, analyzed every metric, and reviewed every 5-year plan, which brings us to today's agenda. Her hawk-like eyes finally settled on Garrett again. "Mr. Vance, I believe you have a presentation for us on a South American market expansion proposal." It was a command, not a request. Garrett's throat was dry. His hands on his laptop trembled slightly. All the confidence, the arrogance he had walked in with, had evaporated. He felt naked, exposed, a fool in a $1,000 suit. He looked at the faces around the table. The Apex executives watched him with predatory curiosity. Rami Saeed stared intently at the table, refusing to look at Garrett, affording him the small mercy of not witnessing his complete and utter annihilation. And Sienna? He risked a glance at her. Her face was pale, her lipstick suddenly garish. The confusion in her eyes had been replaced by the horrified realization of a person who willingly walked into a trap. The boring, placid wife was the CEO. The woman he had dismissed as a sad relic was about to decide his fate. The annihilation, the presentation dissected. "Mr. Vance!" Eleanor's voice was sharp, now impatient. Ava Thorne, the keen legal counsel, who was clearly Eleanor's second-in-command, leaned forward slightly. "Perhaps Mr. Vance is not feeling well. The pressure of presenting to a new board can be significant." The undertone was mocking, and Garrett knew she was in on it. She knew everything. Gathering every last shred of his professional facade, Garrett cleared his throat. "No, I'm fine, of course. My apologies, Madame CEO." The honorific felt acidic on his tongue. He opened his laptop, his fingers clumsy on the keys. The presentation he had been so proud of now felt puerile. A child's crayon drawing submitted to a master artist. He clicked the file open. The title slide, "Nexus Corp Conquering New Frontiers," created by Sienna, appeared on the main screen. It felt like a joke. He was the one who had been conquered. "Please," Eleanor said, gesturing at the screen for him to proceed. "Dazzle us." Her voice was laced with an irony so cold, so sharp, it could have cut diamonds. As Garrett opened his mouth to speak, he knew he was no longer fighting merely for a promotion. He was fighting for the last vestiges of his professional life in front of the woman whose life he had so completely and foolishly underestimated. Garrett began to speak. His voice, a strained, hollow version of his usual confident tone. He tried to fall back on the familiar cadence of his pitch, the practiced words and compelling narrative he and Sienna had rehearsed until it came naturally. But the words felt alien in his mouth, the concepts fragile and transparent. Every assertion of projected growth and synergistic opportunity sounded like a desperate lie under Eleanor's unblinking gaze. She let him speak for exactly 7 minutes. He was just at his crescendo point on the market penetration strategy for Brazil, when her voice cut his presentation like a surgeon's scalpel. "Mr. Vance, a question." He stopped mid-sentence. "Yes, Madame CEO." Eleanor slid a finger across her tablet, and the main screen behind her instantly changed. His meticulously crafted slide was replaced by a dizzying array of spreadsheets and market analysis reports. "Your entire projection for the Brazilian market relies on a 15% annual growth in the consumer electronics sector, with a primary focus on the affluent urban demographic. Is that correct?" "Ah, yes, our data indicates—" "What data?" she interrupted, her tone clinical. "Because my data, compiled from 3 independent global analysis firms, indicates sector growth has stalled at 4% for the last 18 months, with a projected ceiling by CIPA for the next 3 years due to recent tariff implementations. Furthermore, the most significant growth is not in the affluent urban sector, which is already saturated, but in the emerging middle class of secondary cities, a demographic your plan entirely ignores." A murmur went through the Apex executives. They were looking at the data on the screen, then back at Garrett, their expressions ranging from disappointment to sheer disdain. "Additionally," Eleanor continued, relentless, "your proposed distribution and logistics partner, a company called Logistic Azul, is currently under federal investigation for bribery and is on the verge of bankruptcy. Did your due diligence not uncover this?" Garrett froze. That was a detail Sienna should have verified. He shot a look of panic in her direction. Sienna looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Her face was ashen. She was shrinking in her chair, trying to become invisible. We were assured of their stability," Garrett stammered, the excuse sounding pathetic even to his own ears. "Assured." Eleanor's eyebrow arched slightly. "Apex does not operate on assurances, Mr. Vance. It operates on verifiable facts. Your proposed marketing budget, $50 million for the first year, is not only inflated, but is aimed at the wrong people in the wrong places, using a potentially criminal partner. Other than that, it's a stellar plan." The sarcasm was devastating. Some of the Apex board members could not suppress faint, cruel smiles. Rami Saeed stared fixedly at the table, refusing to look at Garrett, affording him the small mercy of not witnessing his complete and utter annihilation. Eleanor was not finished. She systematically, and without a shred of emotion, dismantled his entire presentation. She questioned his advertising spend, pointing out his media buying plan was based on audience data from 3 years ago. She shredded his staffing plan, noting he had budgeted for a huge new office in Sao Paulo, completely failing to consider a more cost-effective remote workforce, a model Apex had perfected. With every point she made, she was not just destroying his professional credibility, she was annihilating the central myth of their marriage. He was the brilliant entrepreneur, the titan of industry. She was the home manager. But in this room, it was clear who possessed the superior intellect, the sharper instincts, and the more rigorous work ethic. He had been playing checkers while she was mastering multi-dimensional chess. Finally, she directed her attention to the projections. "Ms. Cross," her voice said, making Sienna jump in her seat. "I see you co-authored this report." Sienna swallowed hard, her voice a tiny squeak. "These sales projections," Eleanor said, circling a number on the screen with a digital red pen. "A 400% market share increase in 2 years. What model did you use to arrive at this figure?" It was a proprietary algorithm based on synergistic market capture," Sienna managed, reciting a meaningless buzzword they had concocted to sound impressive. Eleanor's expression remained unreadable. "A proprietary algorithm? I see. You may show it to me. Or is the formula as fictitious as the growth it predicts?" Sienna's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She was completely out of her depth. She was a junior analyst who had been so dazzled by her affair with a senior VP that she had neglected her work, assuming his authority would shield her from scrutiny. She had never imagined she would be vetted by a CEO who actually read the fine print. The illusion shattered. Garrett was not a god. He was a fraud. And she had hitched her career, her reputation, to him. The promises of a directorship and a future together now seemed a cruel joke. She felt used, not for her body, but for her complicity. She had been the fool, the eager, ambitious woman who had done his half-baked homework for him. Eleanor turned her cold gaze back to Garrett. Your strategy, Mr. Vance, is not merely flawed. It is lazy. It is a work of profound arrogance built on antiquated assumptions and a shocking lack of diligence. It is the kind of work I would expect from a company that is failing, which, I suppose, is why I was able to acquire it at such a favorable price. She let the final insult land, and the silence in the room was absolute. Richard Sterling paled, realizing the company he had run for 20 years was being branded a sinking ship. Eleanor closed her tablet. The screen behind her went blank. The execution was over. That will be all for the group presentation. The Apex team and I will now break for a strategy session. Mr. Sterling, you are welcome to join us. Mr. said, I would like you to stay as well. I have some questions about Nexus's operational efficiencies. She stood up. A clear dismissal. Mr. Vance, Ms. Cross? The words hung in the air. Excused. Dismissed like school children. All the other Nexus executives were being asked to stay, to consult, to be part of the future. But not him. Not the great VP of marketing. Dazed, Garrett closed his laptop. He couldn't bring himself to look at anyone. He could feel the weight of their judgment, their pity, their scorn. He rose on shaky legs. Sienna fumbled to gather her things. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped her pen, which rolled under the massive table. She dared not retrieve it. She only wanted to escape. As Garrett walked toward the door, his professional life in ruins, Eleanor's voice stopped him one last time. It was softer now, but no less commanding. Actually, Mr. Vance, a word. In my office. Office now. Sienna fled the room without looking back. The heavy glass doors shut behind her, leaving Garrett alone with his wife, his new boss, and the broken fragments of his once perfect life. The correction. The ultimate closure. Eleanor's private office was adjacent to the boardroom. It was even more stunning. A corner suite with 2 walls of glass that made you feel as if you were floating over the city. The decor was minimal and tasteful. A large oak desk, a few pieces of modern art, carefully chosen, and shelves lined not with awards, but with books on economics, philosophy, and engineering. It was the office of a thinker, a builder. Garrett walked in like a condemned man, his footsteps silent on the plush gray carpet. Eleanor walked past him to stand in front of the window, her back to him, looking out at the city. The power dynamic was absolute. She did not offer him a seat. The silence stretched for one long, agonizing minute. Garrett's mind raced, searching for a strategy, an angle, a way to salvage this nightmare. Should he apologize? Plead? Feign ignorance? Rage? Every option felt futile. 15 years ago, Garrett, Eleanor finally said, her voice quiet and reflective. No longer the glacial CEO, but something far more dangerous. The woman he had wronged. 15 years ago, I had just received a patent for a data compression algorithm that was going to revolutionize the industry. I had venture capitalists lining up. I was 28. She turned from the window to face him. Her expression was not one of rage, but of weariness, as if examining a disappointing specimen. And then you got that promotion to senior director. You said we had to move to New York. You said you needed my support. You said one career in the family was enough, and yours was already on a clear trajectory. You asked me to choose. Ellie, he started, his voice cracking. No, she said, raising her hand. Let me finish. I was in love. I was naive. I believed in the partnership. So I chose you. I put my patent in a drawer. I put my dreams on hold. And I became Mrs. Eleanor Vance, the perfect corporate wife. I planned the dinners. I charmed your bosses. I created the serene, effortless home life that allowed you to focus solely on your ambition. Every word was a perfectly placed stone, building a wall between them. For a time, I even believed the story you told everyone, she continued, stepping closer. That I had simply retired. That I was happy with my charity work and book clubs. But then I started seeing it. The condescension, the little jokes at my expense, the way you would explain simple financial concepts to me, as if I were a child. You didn't just want a supportive wife, Garrett. You wanted a smaller one. You needed me to be small so you could feel large. He winced. The truth of her words was undeniable. He had done all of those things. I started getting bored, she said, her voice turning colder. And then, about 5 years ago, I got angry. So I took out that old patent. I used the inheritance my parents left me, the money you always called my little hobby fund, and I set up a small consultancy from the study you never used. I hired 2 brilliant young programmers. I worked while you were on your business trips and late-night client dinners. The pieces clicked together with nauseating clarity. The late nights she spent on her laptop that he dismissed as online shopping. Her frequent lunches with friends in the financial district. It had all been happening right under his nose. Vance Consulting became Apex Strategies, she stated simply. We don't just invest. We build. We create. We innovate. While you were busy rearranging the deck chairs on a stagnant company, I was building a fleet of battleships. And when the opportunity arose to acquire Nexus Corp, well, the irony was too delicious to pass up. Finally, the dam of Garrett's shock broke, replaced by a desperate, sputtering rage. So this is all an elaborate revenge plot. You bought my company just to humiliate me because I had an affair? Eleanor laughed, a short, sharp, humorless sound. An affair, Garrett. You are so stunningly arrogant. You think this is about Sienna Cross? She is a symptom, not the disease. I've known about your affairs for years. Tiffany, the paralegal 2 years ago, the one from HR before that. You are as predictable as you are pathetic. Your infidelity was only the confirmation of what I already knew. Our marriage was an empty shell, a business arrangement where I was the silent, unpaid partner. She walked to her desk and picked up a thick manila envelope, holding it out to him. This isn't about revenge, Garrett. This is about a course correction. My course correction. He didn't take the envelope. He knew what it was. Those are divorce papers, she said. My lawyers will be in touch with yours. The penthouse is in my name. My inheritance assets are protected. You will receive exactly what you are entitled to, per the prenuptial agreement we signed, which, if you recall, you insisted on to protect your future earnings. As for your professional life, her CEO persona clicked back on. Your performance today was abysmal. Your department is bloated and ineffective. Your leadership is based on ego, not results. You are an asset liability to my company. However, firing you on day one would be messy. So here is what will happen. Your department is being restructured, effective immediately. Your role as VP of Marketing is redundant. We are creating a new temporary position for you. Special Projects Consultant, reporting directly to Rami Saeed. The final, perfect humiliation. He would report to his rival. You will be tasked with overseeing the orderly transition of assets and accounts until your position is eliminated in 3 to 6 months. Your bonus is rescinded. Your stock options are now under the control of the new parent company. You will clear out your office before the weekend. Is that clear, Mr. Vance?" Garrett stood there, utterly defeated. He had lost his wife, his mistress, his job, his reputation, and his dignity in the span of a single morning. The man who had walked into the building as a king was walking out less than a commoner. He was a ghost, a footnote in the history of Eleanor Hayes's meteoric rise. "Ellie, please," he whispered the name, a desperate plea for a connection that no longer existed. Eleanor looked at him one last time, her blue eyes showing no hint of pity, only a deep, final sense of closure. "My name," she said, her voice as hard and beautiful as a diamond, "is Ms. Hayes." The epilogue, the legacy of STEM. 6 months later, the Madrid autumn gave way to the first hints of winter. The view from the 60th floor office of Apex Strategies was crystal clear. Eleanor Hayes stood at the window, not as a prisoner in a golden cage, but as a sovereign inspecting her realm. The company thrived under her leadership. She had cut the fat from Nexus Corp as promised, and reinvested in its R&D core, breathing new life into a company that had been slowly suffocating under complacent, egotistical management. Garrett Vance's tenure as special projects consultant had ended quietly. It was, by all accounts, a profoundly humiliating experience for him. Stripped of his title, his corner office, and his authority, he had been forced to witness the company he thought he knew, transformed by the wife he thought he owned. He had done the work assigned to him with a grim, joyless efficiency, a ghost haunting the halls of his former kingdom. 1 year after the acquisition, Eleanor's phone buzzed with a message from Ava Thorne. It was a link to an industry blog with a brief note. "Thought you'd find this amusing." Eleanor tapped the link. The article was a dry piece about the quarterly earnings of a mid-tier logistics company based in Valencia. Her eyes scanned the text until she found the name mentioned in a short paragraph about the company's new regional sales team, Marcus Thorne, the name he reverted to after the divorce. He had been hired as a senior account manager. It was a respectable job, but an astonishing fall from grace for a man who had once been a VP on the verge of the C-suite. He was no longer in the glossy pages of business magazines, but buried in the fine print of a minor trade publication. Eleanor felt a brief, clinical flash of something. Not pity, but a detached acknowledgement of a deserved fate. It was an echo of a life that no longer felt like hers, a ghost story whose power to frighten had long vanished. She closed the article and turned her attention to the documents on her desk. They were the first annual reports for her STEM mentorship program. Applications had tripled. 3 of her first mentees had just received full scholarships to MIT. This was her true legacy. It was not in the destruction of one man's ego, but in the building of futures for countless brilliant young women. She was building an empire not just of profit, but of potential. The snow continued to fall, burying the old world and promising a new one. Eleanor Hayes picked up her pen, a faint smile on her lips, and returned to work, the echo of Garrett Vance's name already forgotten. 3 years after Garrett Vance's departure, Eleanor Hayes was not merely a CEO, but a global authority. Apex Strategies was successfully acquiring competitors, not through hostile takeovers, but because companies sought to be integrated into its highly efficient, data-driven framework. The firm's reputation for ethical, yet ruthless optimization made it the industry leader. Eleanor was in her New York office, preparing for a major merger announcement, when her assistant buzzed in. "Ms. Hayes, there's a highly unusual email. It's from a regional consulting firm in North Carolina. They've submitted a proposal for a major market data synergy project. You told me to vet all major new pitches personally, and this one stands out." "How so?" Eleanor asked, scrolling through an unrelated financial document. "The core analytical framework is structurally sound, highly original, and mathematically elegant, the assistant reported. It is frankly the best synthesis of emerging data we've seen this year. But the name of the lead consultant is Sienna Cross. Eleanor paused, her finger resting on the screen. Sienna Cross, the ambitious, dazzling junior analyst who had been Garrett's accomplice and had fled Nexus Corp the morning of the collapse. Eleanor had not destroyed Sienna's career, allowing her to find work in a smaller market, a deliberate act of choosing correction over annihilation. Bring up her firm's profile, Eleanor commanded. The profile appeared. Sienna's firm was small, independent, and clearly successful. The arrogance had been replaced by a quiet professionalism in her corporate headshot. She has done good work, Eleanor observed quietly. The analysis is stellar. It's precisely the kind of diligence Garrett lacked. The team flagged her history with Mr. Vance and the Nexus debacle, the assistant noted carefully. They want to know if we should redline the proposal for ethical concerns. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, a slight smile touching her lips. This was the true test of her philosophy. Her anger at Garrett had been extinguished. He had paid the price of irrelevance. But Sienna was still a liability, a living connection to the old wounds. No, Eleanor decided. Send the proposal to Rami Saeed. Tell him to vet the numbers and the legal framework, but to ignore the historical, ethical concerns. I want a full breakdown of the project's viability. 2 hours later, Rami Saeed, the new COO, entered her office, holding the proposal. The numbers are flawless, Eleanor. It's brilliant work. It will save us 15% on Q4 forecasting. And the lead consultant, Rami, who had seen Garrett's humiliation firsthand, hesitated. The name is uncomfortable, but if you're asking if she's capable of performing at an apex level, yes, she is. Then we will proceed, Eleanor confirmed. But there will be one condition. We will absorb her firm's proposal and team, integrating them under a 2-year contract. Sienna Cross will report directly to you, Rami. You will mentor her. Her past association with the Nexus failures must be permanently overridden by her demonstrable competence at Apex. Rami nodded, understanding the subtle brilliance of the command. Eleanor wasn't rewarding Sienna, nor was she punishing her. She was validating the work while imposing a rigorous structure, a way to guarantee that Sienna's ambition would be channeled purely into results, with no room for personal politics. Eleanor Hayes had moved so far past petty revenge that she could now extract value from the very people who had once helped tear down her life. She saw Sienna not as a rival or a threat, but as a repurposed asset, a talented mind who had paid her dues and was now worthy of investment. Her final victory wasn't just building Apex strategies. It was using that empire to build a future where competence, not comfort or cruelty. Ultimate currency. Years turned into a decade. Eleanor Hayes was no longer just the CEO of Apex. She was a recognized leader whose ideas on data-driven ethics were reshaping global business practices. She sat in her office, high above London, gazing at the intricate network of lights below, the city's arteries and veins. She had built her empire using a singular, brutal truth. Unleveraged potential is the highest form of negligence. She thought of Garrett, somewhere in Valencia, a low-level manager whose life was now a footnote. She thought of Sienna, now a respected leader within Apex, who had paid the price of ambition but gained competency. She had turned the venom of their arrogance into fuel, and the wreckage of her marriage into the foundation of a global power. Her greatest achievement was not the billions in assets, but the system she had created. A system that could recognize and cultivate value in the unlikeliest of places, in a discarded patent, in an inheritance dismissed as a hobby fund, and even in a talented but misguided former rival. The ultimate irony, she realized, was that Garrett's insult, "You're comfortable, Eleanor," had been correct. He had mistaken her comfort for complacency. He had mistaken her patience for smallness. But true comfort, she had learned, was the absence of reliance on someone else's fragile ego. It was the serene certainty that no external force could ever define or diminish her. Eleanor lifted her hand, looking at the familiar lines on her palm. The scars of the past were invisible. She had been freed by one man's arrogance and crowned by her own intellectual rigor. She was not just the CEO of Apex Strategies. She was the architect of the era of Equitas, a time where value, once underestimated, was destined to prevail. And in the silence of her high-rise office, Eleanor smiled. The story was over. Her legacy had begun.